As I've been making videos on YouTube and just talking about watches, of course, I've gotten a little bit more intertwined with the watch industry and I've learned more about it. And as a result, I've gained more appreciation for watches, but also have become increasingly concerned with certain aspects of the industry itself. So I want to go through 7 things about the industry. I try to limit it to 7. There are certainly more I could have included, and the things that annoy me about the watch industry. All right, guys, well, all these points, of course, are going to be my assessments, but I'll try to back each one of them up with some good kind of facts and reasoning behind each one of these points. And also, going through this, I don't want to come off as somebody that's like overly self-important. I'm just generally somebody that loves watches and wants to make sure the industry keeps moving forward, so by the time I'm 50 years old, the thing isn't just limping along. But the first point here is one that's certainly not a major one, but it leads into points that I think are very important following that, and I think it all connects to that. And it is bad website and user experiences on websites from these brands. So have you ever went to a website? Mostly, I would say higher end brands are probably most guilty of this, but going to a site like Rolex, and try it right now. Go to Rolex's website, try to find all of the Datejust models, like try to view their entire collection. It'll take you a while. You'll have to scroll through. It's not intuitive at all. And you can honestly get lost, especially for somebody who maybe isn't that tech savvy. For myself, I consider myself certainly above average when it comes to savviness with technology. And even for myself, and I've been to the site hundreds and hundreds of times, it's hard to navigate. Go to a place like AP. When I was doing a video about the code 1159, the site was so slow in terms of just being able to view information, find more information about the pieces themselves. You have JavaScript that's just loading forever. I mean, going through their site, we've got load times and wait times longer than that for a mediocre ride at Disney World. But I think all of this leads into the next point, and the fact that when we go to a website, especially from a brand, we're expecting and we have an expectation of what is the direct call to action from that brand, which is usually add something to your cart and then buy it. And this is actually brings up the next 2 points, which is outdated e-commerce and then also an outdated authorized dealer model. So when you go to a place like Rolex, you want to go buy a watch. If you want to buy a watch online, a new watch, you can't do it. It's impossible because that is not how they've structured the website. And the whole point of it, that website itself is not to actually convert buyers directly on that web page. But when you go and hit that call to action, instead of add to bag, go just, buy it now. What you'll instead have is you'll say, find a boutique, find a store near you. Because what they want to do is promote their authorized dealer network. So over the last 50 years, 100 years, Rolex, these brands, all these luxury brands and just watch brands in general have developed this infrastructure and this selling model around brick and mortar authorized dealership locations, where you go into a store and you have to buy from that authorized dealer. So I've done an entire video, authorized dealers in gray markets. But just to go into this a little bit further here, because there's some things I actually learned, because I went through the process of actually trying to become an authorized dealer for a couple brands, and I learned a few things, and also just in my conversation with authorized dealers and people going throughout that process and learning more about this structure, some alarming things that made it even worse than what I originally thought. So just a quick rundown for those that aren't familiar. In order to sell a watch, a brand's watch, you first need to be approved as an authorized dealer, which requires approval through paperwork, usually finding a brick and mortar location and identifying with that, and other additional information. However, the model itself is built on that traditional brick and mortar model, a model that if you look at the entire landscape of retail, you understand that it is a dying model. But since brands have invested so much money in their boutiques and these authorized dealership locations in these sales channels, it seems that they are too deep in a hole to change anything about it. And to add insult to injury, it blew my mind just how a lot of these brands aren't very cooperative and supportive to their ADs, depending on the brand. For one, as an authorized dealer, you don't have the ability to just handpick the watches that you want to sell. Most brands, what they're doing, they'll either have certain catalogs that you have to start selling, and what some brands are doing, maybe with some lower end brands, what they'll do is they'll actually go ahead and offer up only certain collections within their actual inventory to start. So if you want to eventually be able to sell some of their more sought after pieces, what you'll have to do first is prove a track record in selling maybe some of their cheaper models to eventually get to, say, like a boutique type of models that maybe are like mechanical, more sought after when it comes to value on the market. But what really blew my mind was dealing with luxury brands and what's happening here. If you're an authorized dealer for a lot of luxury brands, you're not able to just handpick the models that you want to carry. If you want to be a seller of Rolex, in a lot of cases, what the brand is doing is it's making you take on inventory of their entire collection, because what they don't want to have happen is they don't want to have their Steel Sports and their best sellers be the only watches that they're moving and actually displaying to customers. They want to have their entire catalog be offered up. So authorized dealers don't have the ability to handpick. I just want to sell the Rolex Submariner, but I don't really want to sell the Rolex Cellini or a diamond dial day-date. But that's not really how this works, which is frustrating and which leads to this vicious cycle of the gray market. Now, I've done a whole video on this subject, but for those who aren't familiar, what's happening is because all of these authorized dealers are being forced to take on excess amount of inventory, and sometimes they're not able to actually sell it, especially at retail price, what's happening is they have these new models coming in. So you have all the 2018 models available currently and you're struggling to sell them. And then we just had Baselworld last week where all these 2019 models are coming out. And you have to bring on that new inventory, but you're still struggling to sell it. Plus you have overhead costs of keeping the lights on. And what these gray market dealers will do is come in and they'll buy just in bulk a lot of these older models so that these authorized dealers can just move inventory and then bring on new inventory to start selling. And then what these gray market dealers will do is then sell these watches at a discount, which is you will find very frequently with different places online. A lot of Amazon listings are from gray market dealers or independent sellers. There are still authorized dealers on Amazon, but just as an example, and there's plenty of other places out there when you find 25, 30% off the retail price online, that's what's happening there typically. It's not illegal, but it is happening. But what this does is it's then leading into a harder time for the authorized dealers, and then a perceived value of that actual watch itself is going down from the public point of view. And in the day and age where we love discounts, in the digital day and age where we love seeing that, it makes it harder for the models to sell, and it hurts the actual brand's image to go along with that. And I think what's also leading into to showing how much this is hurting the industry is the fact that we have brands out here buying millions and millions of dollars worth of watches on the gray market just so they can sustain the value and the actual prices of their watches. So I think we're reaching a breaking point, but something certainly needs to change here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think a lot of this issue kind of comes on with inventory that authorized dealers are forced to take upon, and they're not really getting a lot of assistance from the brands themselves, from what I am hearing from authorized dealers that I've had conversations with. And even with this authorized dealership model, it leads to my next point, which is accessibility to watches. So even with all of this infrastructure and selling through brick and mortar locations, they still can't cover it all. And with people being able to find watches online, start seeking them out, and having a demand for them, and not being able to go down the street and actually see them, it becomes to prove the point, how is this model effective? Unless you're in a city like New York City, Paris, LA, London, Mexico City, millions and millions and millions of people, chances are a lot of the brands that you might be interested in, especially if you're a watch enthusiast and like maybe some non-mainstream brands, for lack of a better term, you're gonna have trouble being able to actually wear those pieces before buying. Like myself in Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, there's a metropolitan area that's not small. I mean, in Northeast Ohio, where I'm from, we have over 3 million people. That's a lot of people. But if I wanted to go try on like a brand like Breguet or Lange, even Nomos, a brand that I'm wearing, tough luck. I can't do that. If I wanted to go try on a Lange, I'd have to either go pre-owned somewhere and just hope that they have one, probably have limited selection, or I have to drive 2.5 hours or 2 hours to Pittsburgh and go to an authorized dealer there. It's tough and it's not sustainable. And then even with these mainstream brands where there's mass appeal, like a brand like Rolex, even with this model, they're not able to actually have inventory available for like their Steel Sports models. There's a wait list, and it just pisses off buyers, and then also it seems like a lot of these brands are just leaving their authorized dealers hanging out to dry here, and don't really communicate a lot of information about when new models are coming and what that process is like. I don't know if that's just a wall that's being put up from a buyer point of view talking to an AD, but it seems pretty genuine from my conversations with them. So this next point I think is, for one, an incredible opportunity for brands that they're just completely overlooking, in my opinion, which is lack of support and information for vintage and the brand's history. So one of the most frustrating aspects of, for one, having a YouTube channel and just being a watch enthusiast, being interested in vintage watches, is the fact that there aren't reliable places for information to really authenticate different watches and finding parts of history of brands that we all kind of come to love. And think about this for an example. If you're a brand creating 50,000 watches per year, you've been creating wristwatches for 100 years, you just do the math, there's millions of watches out there that are circulating. Chances are they're still in people's possessions. Maybe they're owned by someone's father that they just got passed down to them. It's just sitting in a drawer somewhere. Somebody stumbles upon it. What are you doing as a brand to support those people that maybe stumble on this vintage timepiece to get them in to learn more about your history and to maybe become an enthusiast and a collector? And why I find this so frustrating is the fact that brands, what they sell, what they try to sell, their number one selling point for a lot of them is the history and just the actual prestige that comes with their brand. But why is it that the very thing that these brands try to sell is the very thing that they seem to be neglecting the most? As an example, I get tons of questions about vintage timepieces and saying, hey, Teddy, I'd love to learn some more information about this. I found this in a drawer. My dad owned this watch and he just gave it to me. And in a lot of cases, it's hard for me to even find information and just learn more about these pieces because, for one, there's no reliable place that's supported for a lot of these manufacturers. Say you have a Longines watch, not to throw them under the bus, but if you have a vintage timepiece from them, where can you go to find that information? In most cases, the most reliable place to go is a forum post that last saw activity 3+ years ago and other random sources and blogs that you don't really even know how accurate they are. And I think there are some brands that are doing a better job of this compared to others, but still, even the ones that are doing things in this area, I think could do so much more. For one, like an example, Vacheron Constantin, I think they're doing a great job in starting to position their history and their vintage timepieces and offering them. What they're actually doing is they're restoring some of vintage watches and actually offering them up for sale directly from the manufacturer. But the problem with it is they're only doing 50 to 100 every year. I'm sure they're trying to sell the exclusivity of them, which I understand, but I think they certainly could scale this out even more. And then also how they're selling them, I think, is a little outdated. They're going through boutique to boutique. So what they'll do is they'll spend time, all the collection of vintage timepieces available that year or in that particular season will be at, say, like the Hong Kong boutique. And then we'll spend some time there for an X amount of time and then move to the next boutique. So then say you're waiting for them to come to the New York boutique to get your hands on these very exclusive vintage timepieces. If it stops at another boutique prior to that, you're kind of out of luck and there's no other way to get them. Also, a brand like Omega, I think a brand that does it better than most brands do, but still a lot of room for improvement. If you go to their website, they have an entire catalog and directory of a lot of their vintage calibers that you can cross-reference, get some information about, as well as different models. But I think there's a lot of ways to improve this because I think the most important aspect is pictures and diagrams, information outside of just text. As a lot of the information they're providing and pictures they're providing are either old sketches or just these simple like 2D flat designs that don't really give you a good reference point, which is probably the most important aspect to what you're looking for in terms of authenticating a vintage watch that you're looking to buy or maybe you have in your possession and trying to finger more information about. But I think this is a huge opportunity for brands from both helping spread that history, that story, that selling point that they're trying so hard to position now in this digital age, and I think they're actually falling short in doing it, but also another way and another income and another way of revenue for these brands themselves, because I know I myself would pay a little bit more of a premium to get a vintage watch directly, say, from Omega that was serviced by them and I can for sure authenticate is a authentic watch because it's being sold by them. And I think a lot of other people would be the same way instead of going through eBay and seeing a watch for sale there. So a great opportunity that I think is certainly falling flat, and that's another point. Now for our next point, horribly run social media accounts and lack of personal touch through digital. And that's really what watches are. It's a personal journey. It's a personal just event to be able to feel a timepiece. It's a connection that somebody has. It's an emotional connection. So how brands have been able to transfer that over to digital is subpar to say the least. And I think it contributes to a couple things. Looking at a couple examples, one maybe being on YouTube. You look at a brand like Seiko, a brand that's, of course, entry level, perceived as entry level from a mechanical point of view compared to a lot of other brands, and are near and dear to a lot of people's heart. But their ability to connect with individuals on a personal level, I think, is incredibly poor. And they're, of course, not the only one guilty of this. You go to their YouTube channel as an example, because this is my backyard. I mean, I'm on YouTube all the time. You look at their videos and all of them, you watch them, they feel like ads. They don't feel like content. And think about the content that you absorb on a day-to-day basis. It usually has a personal touch to it. There's a person you're watching. There's a person you're connecting with. Just like how you're watching this video right now. I'm just some guy talking into a camera about watches. But you're here and you're not watching videos from that brand that just feel like an ad. And it blows my mind that they don't have a personal touch. Why don't they have somebody on staff talking about their watches, releasing a video every day, giving a sense of that history as well, and why you should care about that brand and providing real value rather than just having this very synthetic, really unattainable type of feel with their videos. And then on top of that, what it's also doing is it's not sustainable. In today's day and age, what you need to do is everybody wants a ton of content. They get bored very easily. They want to see more and more and more. And because these brands are investing so much and are creating web content and treating it like TV ads, it's not able to be sustained at the volume in which is necessary online to actually garner up and maintain an audience and keep them engaged. Because they have to spend tens of thousands of dollars just to create one video, and it's going to be impossible for them to maintain the volume needed. Also, going over to Instagram, and this is, of course, I think it's kind of a nitpicky example, but you look at a brand like Patek, and of course they have a certain audience, but the practice that they just go through with social media, I think, is a telling story about issues in which how brands are running their social media. And running social media account, keeping people engaged is hard. It's very hard to do it. And we shouldn't diminish that. It's hard to get people engaged. I do that every day. It's so hard to get people to continue to come back, engage with your content, and come up with new ideas. I can see how that's very difficult for somebody that's not as passionate about something. You get somebody on staff who just is forced to, hit different metrics, doesn't really care, just wants to get the job done. But you go to Patek's Instagram account, and they do one of the things that annoys me more than anything, and I think just goes to show how much their head is up their own you-know-what, and not actually have any sense of how people are absorbing content and are demanding to absorb content nowadays, which is you go to their webpage, you go to their Instagram page, pardon me, and you see this like collage-like feed, which looks nice on the surface, but it totally counteracts how people are engaging content. Because what they'll do is they'll create and post a photo that's like basically just a corner of a watch. And imagine scrolling through your feed and all you see is this little corner of a watch. How does that create engagement? Think about how you're absorbing content. People don't absorb content by going to your profile and going through all of your different posts. They do it through scrolling. You have to think about what the end individual is doing, and to maintain that nice little picture on their profile and have that collage look all pretty is they'll post all like 9 pictures to create that image within 24 hours, which completely inundates the individual and also leads to poor engagement amongst those posts. As an example, I'll go to a post last year from them. This is Patek. They have 500,000, over 500,000 followers on their Instagram page, and just getting over 1,000 likes on a post. I know that Instagram might not be a way in which they're selling watches, but just the lack of ability to engage people, and it just alarmed me because someone like myself, 16,000 followers, not that many compared to Patek, of course, but I'm getting more engagement, which is blowing my mind. And it took me 5 seconds to post a photo. I just take it with my iPhone. That's what people want to see. That's what people are used to. Imagine if Kylie Jenner, I can't believe I'm comparing Patek to Kylie Jenner, posts a selfie and it's just her cheekbone. That's not what people are looking for, and it's not how people engage. And then the final point that I have here kind of goes hand in hand, and that is just neglecting marketing and brand awareness to younger demographics. So I know brands need to hit their metrics. They need to sell a certain amount of watches every single year, but the amount of commitment to things that have worked in the past and expecting them to continue to work in the future blows my mind. The fact that brands are still, in 2017, a report saying that they spent 57%, luxury brands, of their total advertising dollars through print and magazine ads, blows my mind, and I think just shows how backwards this is. And in 2019, it's still projected to be 55% of their total advertising through print and magazines. Because one thing, I just look at the demographics that are watching my content. There are people 55 to 65. Those are larger demographics for my channel, and people are looking for these digital ways of being interacted with. But brands continue to just go with models that have just worked for so long and expect it to continue to work. I think there's going to be a breaking point. In addition, there's no way to actually track or not very good ways, especially in this 21st century way of going about tracking ads and dollars spent through marketing, on how it's going to convert a customer. If somebody goes and flips through a magazine, ends up buying your watch, you have no ability to see that return on dollars spent on that ad. Even someone like myself, I can see how much I am going to get a return on posting a video to somebody maybe going to my site and buying a strap, or somebody going in and hitting the link down below and going to Bob's Watches and buying a watch. I can see what is converting. I have the ability to track that, and I'm just some small little YouTuber, but a lot of these major powerhouse brands don't have the infrastructure, don't care about setting up an infrastructure to support that, and are putting more dollars into things that, of course, I don't think are doing the same return, and you can't track the return. Of course, brands need to maintain a level of brand awareness, top of funnel awareness, but the lack of oversight here blows my mind. As brands, I think maybe they think that millennials, younger people, and I hate the term like millennials and just talking about generations, it annoys me like crazy, but maybe they think that they aren't going to be as interested in watches compared to older generations. And just as a parallel, to kind of just play devil's advocate and say why I don't think they can just make that assumption plainly randomly, is the fact that when you look at vinyl records, something that I think from the public point of view, people that aren't interested in watches and maybe aren't interested in vinyl records or either or the sort, probably think that they're equally as antiquated. They're things that we don't necessarily need anymore, and they're kind of more nostalgic things that we maybe cling on to. But look at that. Look at the sales of vinyl records over the last 13 years. Year after year, for the last 13 years, vinyl record sales have went up. And the number one people that are promoting that are not older demographics. It's younger, middle-aged adults who are spurring that on. I don't know what leads to this, but just to make an assumption for myself, I just think we're so bombarded with all of this subpar information, subpar digital content, as well as the products that we buy, that finding something that is timeless, finding something that is handmade, I think is something people are seeking out. And something like watches, which I think personally, even from an objective standpoint of view, is still more useful than a vinyl record. And you have to get the record player out and get out, you have to sit down and do that. A watch you can bring with you, it's useful, it tells time. The fact that brands aren't trying to capitalize on that, tell that story, going back to the other point prior, talking about the history, it's a missed opportunity. And ultimately, I just don't want to see brands go down this path, continue to remain complacent, and start to address some of these issues that I find and the things that annoy me, because personally, I think they will ultimately come up and cause a lot of concern for the industry going forward. So guys, what do you think of these points? I'd love to see comments down below, because these are some of mine, these are some of the things I'm concerned with, but I'd love to see yours as well. So guys, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Also head over to our website. We have so many watch straps available now. I want that place to be the place to go when it comes to buying watch straps. So head over there. It's a great way to support the content, as well as going in the link in the description, like I mentioned earlier, and going to Bob's Watches, one of the largest online retailers for watches in the world, and a great place to buy a watch for yourself while supporting the content in the process. And then finally, if you want to join our watch giveaway, fill out the watch giveaway form down below, and then follow me on Instagram. So guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.